Okay, everyone, places, and action.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You talking to me?
Here, looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
This is a Cinema Plus podcast, brought to you by More Movies.
Hello, and welcome to the Cinema Plus podcast, brought to you by moremovies.co.uk. I'm Greg Fisher, and in episode 9 I will be joined by my trusty sidekick, Dave Roberts, as we discuss one of my very favourite films of all time, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Released in 1975, this unique drama is set in a mental hospital on a ward where the patients are joined by Randle McMurphy, a convicted criminal who is pleading insanity. Quickly ingratiating himself with the other patients, McMurphy soon rules the roost, which puts him in the crosshairs of the intimidating Nurse Ratched. Both characters begin a battle of wills that ultimately leads to a tragic ending. Despite this, there are many funny moments in this incredibly well-acted piece. It went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Jack Nicholson, who plays McMurphy, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, who plays Ratched, Best Director for Miloš Forman, and Best Cinematography. Before we get into it, here's the main man himself, Mr. Jack Nicholson, talking about some of the experiences he had making the film.
And I improvised a lot in this period. The baseball game I did from the box score of the game itself, Miloš liked to improvise also. And because my daughter was on the set with Dr. Brooks, I kind of was showing off for her, and I think maybe it's the best improvisation I ever did, because all he did was read me the application, and I answered the questions. But I was up for it because my daughter Jennifer was there. I was kind of showing off a little bit. But the best improvisation, I'm saying these things because you might see them in the film, was Danny DeVito, who the first time we did the basketball game, I passed him the ball like this, and he turned around and threw it right into the fence where the camera was. I mean, I laughed so hard. I thought, what an impulse, fantastic. You want to prove, yeah, I got it. He's like completely insane.
So there we go. Dave, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, wow. Well, I haven't seen this in quite a few years. I don't think I've seen it since we went to university, actually, I think. But such a powerful film all over again. This is up there with the greatest, isn't it? It's one of the very best films ever put on screen. And such a ride of emotions throughout. And this is Jack Nicholson at his absolute peak for me. This is the very best of Nicholson. Probably my favourite actor of all time anyway, but this is it's another level.
Absolutely agree. This for me is my favourite film. It is the number one. If I had to, I hate to choose it and I have to boil down to one, because obviously we all have our favourite films, plural, but this, for me, is the number one film. I absolutely agree with you about Jack. It's the role he was born to play. He's not Jack Nicholson in this film. He is R.P. McMurphy. As good as he always is, and he is always good. But in this is something extra special. It's an extra special film. It's like no other. Obviously won a load of Academy Awards, rightly so. Had a bit of a history before that, obviously based on the book Ken Kesey. It was on Broadway. Kirk Douglas played McMurphy, and we eventually get Michael Douglas producing this and Jack starring as McMurphy. A lot of people know that backstory, but on top of Jack as well, what about the rest of the cast?
Well, yeah, that's the next thing I was going to bring up, really. It's an absolute phenomenal cast. Although I guess around the time of its release, it wasn't a well-known cast, because this is the beginning of
first time
many people's
for
careers.
Christopher Lloyd in a big thing like this. First time for Danny DeVito.
But obviously to go on and have the careers they had, rightfully so, and boiling down to their performances in this, which were, absolutely outstanding performances. You believe every character.
Every single character in this is so believable.
Yeah.
The guy who plays Dr. Spivey, he is an actual doctor. He's not an actor.
Yes, I was reading about that, yeah.
So that's how realistic this is. They really did go neo-realism on this. Obviously, it's Miloš Forman, so it has got a European feel to it. And for that for me means realism. Here in the UK, we're known for realism. The Italian neo-realists, they're all countries have had their time with it. And this, for me, is incredibly realistic film. The acting of someone like Danny DeVito and the way he acts that character, that if you showed it to somebody who'd never seen it and you said some of these people are actual mental patients, try and guess which ones, they wouldn't be able to guess with some of those. That's how good the acting is.
It's absolutely outstanding, and I think that's right. Yeah, I think the European kind of feel to the film with that realism is exactly right. I think during that early period, especially, it's changed a bit now, I think, but it was based on that kind of neo-realism, and it comes across so well, and it's all based on that kind of method ideology, which is based in with Nicholson and stuff like that. But you look at some of the performances as well. Danny DeVito, most well known, obviously later in his career, for those comedy roles, those more over the top roles. You see him here, and it's such a different performance.
Oh yeah, well he's playing somebody with quite an extreme mental illness. To the point of like disability. He's one of the sectioned patients. He's not going anywhere because unfortunately he's his condition is quite heightened compared to some of them, and he plays it perfectly.
And I think that comes across because understanding that they shot this on an actual ward, and prior to the film, the actors were shadowing mental patients and kind of getting to know how they behave. And that kind of method ideology of what would a patient do in these circumstances, or what are the possibilities they could do. And it takes them to those places, and to see that come across on the screen is remarkable.
And also, you got to give it to Louise Fletcher for playing a bad guy that makes Darth Vader look like a cuddly, lovely rapscallion. She is unbelievably cold and evil in this.
Unbelievably cold, but it's a strange kind of character in a way, because there's sympathy for the character there. Why is she like she is? It's hard, it's hard to fathom around it.
Well, when I say evil, I think I mean, she's a manipulator. She treats them all like her children, but to the point that they're completely under her power, in the sense that they can never leave. And she knows how to push everyone's buttons. She always has to be the powerful one in control. Yes, she's very human, and there is that element of her being a nurse and caring, and certainly comes across like that sometimes, but ultimately, a very manipulative person.
But I think it's interesting because, of course, the film is ultimately about power dynamics, really, and her position of power. It's like her character is caught up in the flawed system of the time. The system that instead of caring for these patients, it treats it more like a prison. And she's caught up in the power struggle of it all, and is so caught up in that element of trying to establish the position that she goes to places that perhaps as a outside of the facility she wouldn't, and it's and maybe the coldness is brought on over kind of her own mental scarrings of working for such an institution over such a long period of time. But it's a very interesting character, and expertly played.
Without a doubt, she's an interesting character. But I'll say it again: she is one of the most evil, witch-like characters, or villains of the piece. One of the most famous ones. I mean, Louise Fletcher, who plays her, she won the Academy Award as well for her performance. She got death threats in the mail. These kind of you know, these kind of dumbass people who believe in stupid shit like QAnon or vote for Donald Trump or something. They're the kind of people that wrote death threats to her, thinking that she was actually Nurse Ratched in real life, you know. But that goes to show you how great a performance it is. If you remember, the first time McMurphy experiences the group meeting, where they always have in the morning, it starts off very calm, it's very measured, and obviously start talking to Harding about his problems with his wife.
I'm not just talking about my wife, I'm talking about my life. I can't seem to get that through to you. I'm not just talking about one person, I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about form, I'm talking about content, I'm talking about interrelationships, I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand? Finally!
And then there's this look that Jack just looks at her, and she's got this look on her face. And it's like, you're in my pool now, mate. And this is how it goes. She says all that with her eyes, you know, and it's just like,
yeah.
You now you see where you are. And oh man, it gives me the chills every time. It's just such an incredible opener for him and an introduction to that character of how powerful she actually is. When you say about a power struggle, she is the power. She's got the power over the Dr. Spivey because he'll listen to anything she says. If she says we should keep McMurphy here and really try and help him, and he'll okay, Mildred, he goes along with it, you know. And she really is, like I say, she's Darth Vader in this film, man. She's incredible. You know, you need them in all of these films. Like in Cool Hand Luke, you've got the captain there of the prison and stuff, the warden guy, and Luke, and they're kind of at odds, and this is the ultimate example, really, because there is obviously a mutual respect and almost a dynamic of sexual tension between Jack's character and Nurse Ratched. It's undeniable.
Yeah, it's interesting as well because I think the great thing about this film is it's a film of subtleties. There's so many small things going on to pay attention to that you know, it's one of the things you wouldn't notice them on first viewings, but the more you kind of dig into it and you see the small things happening which affect. And I love the little subtlety of each time. Obviously all the characters in the beginning, apart from Randle, start with, you know, they've got the white overalls, you know, they're all the same, they're part of the system. And slowly, as each character develops their own power and freedom and confidence in themselves, they each start, their costumes change. They take on a little motive, whether it's something with the white clothing or whether they actually change their clothing completely.
There's a brilliant moment where Jack comes in after, when he's first had the electric shock, and he comes in, remember, he's pretending to be a zombie. But then when he breaks out of it, and they are all so happy to see him, they all have a moment, and he says, "Nice shirt, Chesaroo!" And he compliments him on the shirt. And I absolutely love that you brought that up, that this individualism and this colour is coming back into their lives, provided by McMurphy and all their shenanigans. Because, you know, he comes in and he changes their lives, and this is one of the beautiful layers of Cuckoo's Nest. That when he first turns up, he just treats everybody as if he's hanging out in a bar or in prison or wherever. And you know, that first time when he comes in and they're all playing cards, and young Billy, that's again, Brad Dourif is one of the greatest actors. He gets, you know, people love him. He's played some amazing parts, especially as sort of like, you know, horror parts. He was in Mississippi Burning as well, and he played Grey Worm, didn't he, in Lord of the Rings? Really, always brilliant. But in this, the young Brad Dourif again would have been a nobody or an unknown when this came out, and he is astonishing. But McMurphy comes in, they're all playing cards. Billy's interested in who's this new guy, this cool guy, and Harding's trying to ignore him. Cheswick's just being Cheswick, absolute legend. And yeah, it's just that holy circle, and he's watching them, he's taking them in. A couple of scenes later, he's dealing the cards out, he's giving them all nicknames, Tabes, Cesaro, all of these really, he's like in the thick of it. And it just has this impact on them immediately. And she sees it. She sees it straight away. And really that culminates when he has a bet with them all and says, I bet you I can put a bug up her ass, he says, and
yeah,
I'll bet a buck. And really what happens is she's so good because he has the vote about the baseball, about the World Series, and she beats him both times. But that moment when he decides to go and sit down and watch the baseball anyway, even though the TV's off, and he gets them all going and they're all shouting and screaming, they're all having a brilliant time. So in a way it's like he's saying, this is why you didn't want us to do this, because of all this hullabaloo, so we're going to do it anyway.
We're going to do it anyway.
I mean, wow, that's game on. From that point on, he really is in trouble then, because that's where he's crossed swords with her. And there's the basketball game as well, where that's another pivotal moment for him. Then the fishing trip. All these things are like, he's bringing so much into their lives. He's being inclusive. They're all kind of being part of it. It's like us, the nuts, versus the house, if you will. The doctors and the porters and stuff.
Well, I think that the best performance, of course, is Nicholson, I think. But my second favourite performance is Brad as Billy. And I think he's my favourite character in the piece because he's such a likeable character, that innocent, childlike kind of wonderment.
Oh, yeah.
And his, his rise and then obviously tragic fall.
He should have got an Oscar as well. That is such a powerful performance from Brad Dourif.
It's really heartbreaking in the end,
Oh my God, it just tears you to pieces. Here's my Cuckoo's Nest story. When I was about 15 years old, that's when I'd really started to get into cinema, not just watching films and watching whatever. I'm really starting to get an appreciation for the history of film and the great films, as you do, And BBC Two at the time and Channel 4, they used to play the best films. That's where I first saw things like Scorsese's Mean Streets or Taxi Driver or Once Upon a Time in America or Sid and Nancy. And all of these, too many to mention, but one night they put on Cuckoo's Nest and I'd never seen it, but I'd heard about it. And I was already a fan of Jack Nicholson thanks to Easy Rider or Five Easy Pieces, all of his great films. By then he'd been the Joker in Batman and everything. Anyway, it was on. I knew it was going to be good. I had the VHS set up to record it. And I watched it all the way through, a couple of hours, and had that experience that you have when you first watch this film. Absolutely blew me away. And for the first time in my life, as soon as the film had finished, I stopped the videotape from recording, rewound it all the way to the beginning and watched it again. So I was up to like 4 a.m, it didn't finish till 2 or whatever, and then took it back, watched it. I just couldn't believe what I'd seen. I've never done that since. I'll probably never do it again with another film, but that was the film I did it with.
Such a profound effect.
It was such a moving film. It's even now, watching it again just to do this podcast, it's probably been about 5 years since I've seen it. I've got a nice copy of it with a nice transfer, and it's got some good special features on and stuff, but it's been a few years because I've seen it so many times. I have watched this film a lot, but even this time, having a rewatch just to get up to speed again for the podcast, I was emotional watching it. Even in the bits that are funny and stuff, it's got now starting to have a real sense of nostalgia with me as well, because I was looking at it and I was thinking, God, that time's long gone. That time that the film was made in, before our time. It was filmed in the 70s. I think it's supposed to be it's fairly contemporary, maybe set a few years before 75. I mean, the book came out in 62, so I
think it's meant to be set in the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's fairly contemporary of the time, but I was thinking that world is gone. That world is just... And even that makes you emotional, and... It's just an incredible film. There's some of my favourite scenes ever in this film. I mean, you laugh so much for the first hour or so. I was anyway. I was absolutely bawling with laughter. It's such a funny film because of those performances, and because Jack Nicholson's such a mixer in there. He's lighting them all on fire really, and he's setting them off like firecrackers. It's a hell of a funny film.
They was giving me 10,000 watts a day, and I'm hot to trot. Next woman takes me on is gonna light up like a pinball machine and pay off in silver dollars.
I think that's it. It's a film that's packed with every emotion you can run through in a film. It's got the sympathy, it's got the sadness, it's got the laughter, it's got the happiness, it's got the anger.
Yeah.
You feel it all the way through.
Yeah.
And it takes you on a complete roller coaster of emotions.
Oh, it does.
And you completely gravitate towards every piece of it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, really, because it's really a chaotic film. It's the film's about chaos. It's chaos in their lives, and the story's chaotic, but it's kind of presented chaotically as well.
Yeah.
But that's the joy of it, because it thematically links together with it. It's it's 2 hours of set pieces going on, but each one is a complete kind of snapshot into these characters and their lives.
Well, as he gets more institutionalized, we get more institutionalized as the viewers, and we get to love these people and feel comfortable when we're back in the ward, and it's medication time. It's medication time. we feel comfortable. We've had a good time with these guys. Everybody's made us laugh. We've all bonded and become a bit closer in these crazy shenanigans, and you start to feel those walls closing in on yourself in a way. It's quite incredible that it manages to convey this, because none of us, unless you've got relatives or have had the misfortune to be in one of these institutions yourself, then it's very hard for somebody who hasn't to even imagine what it might be like. And this really, it just gives you, oh God, it's it's funny when it's funny, but when it gets serious, this is a serious movie. When they're waiting to get zapped for the first time, jeez.
It's a very stark portrayal of a very dark part of our world, and yes, although there's the kind of elements where it's the loveliness of the characters, the people, and that's the nice part. The kind of elements of the institution is the kind of horrific backdrop of what it is, and it's a powerful contrast of them all, and it brings that fascinating debate, into the film, which I would say we'd all agree with exactly what they're saying in a way, but that the kind of state or the belief of the people running the institution at the time is that this orderly, regimented structure is what is good for these people, is good in their lives and keeps them calm. But what is really good for them is Randle coming in, creating chaos, and that's what gives them true happiness.
Yeah.
That's what gives them personal freedom.
Yeah.
Although they're scared to go and get their real freedom, or in some cases can't get their freedom, that is, and that's the kind of journey throughout, really. And it's a really nice, a very nice journey with a tragic ending.
Sure.
But and it's interesting with Randle, because obviously he comes into the institution for having done something demonstrable,
Oh yeah, he's statutory rape.
And yet, despite that, you fall in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
But, for his roguelike charm.
Sure.
And although there's the negatives of the man, the character, there's the positive energy that he can bring to other characters and improve their lives.
Well, this is the thing. This is a film of the 70s. This is the decade of the anti-hero. Obviously, you've got your Dirty Harrys and so on into the new Hollywood directors, full of anti-heroes. Bank robbers, criminals become suddenly the protagonists of these pieces, the ones that we are asked to relate to. And R.P. McMurphy is that ultimate anti-hero because, as you say, he's in there, or he should be in prison, really, for having underage sex. And he's obviously got into a few scraps, but he isn't the world's worst person. And this becomes apparent.
No.
He is a bit of a rogue. He is a bit of a card shark and a gambler, and he likes to rabble-rouse and get a reaction out of people. But he is a man with a heart deep down, and the more you get to know him, the more you think, maybe you would trust him. Maybe he has got his ways about him, but we're having a good time too. We're laughing along. But as I say, this is the decade of the anti-hero. So Jack really was, like you said, it was Jack at his zenith, Jack at his top of his game, so to speak. The lovable rogue. But
and it's an enigmatic performance, isn't it? Because I kept on thinking throughout, every time Nicholson's on screen, that charismatic energy he has, it's just so electrifying.
Oh, you can't take your eyes off him. You don't know what he's going to do next. See, right, as soon as they take the cuffs off, he grabs that guy and gives him a kiss. That was all improvised. That guy didn't know he was going to do that. Apparently, Louise Fletcher, she said in this one interview that when they were doing some rehearsals before the principal photography started, he'd asked her earlier on, what's your character's maiden name? Not maiden name, Christian name. And there wasn't one given, it was just Nurse Ratched. So she said Mildred. And then, quite a bit of time goes by, however long, 6 weeks or something, and they're filming that scene where he comes back in after being zapped. And, he's pretending to be catatonic, and then he's on fire, having a great laugh. And that's the first time in that scene he says, "Yes, Mildred." And she said of that, you could see in her face she went crimson, she went embarrassed, because he'd not referred to it again since he asked her all that time previously. And he had that in the top pocket the whole time and just played that card when it was the perfect time to play it.
Perfect moment.
And he called her Mildred, and she, and wow, that's the standard of artistry going on here with all of these people.
I think that's the thing, particularly Nicholson. I mean, I'd say he's one of my favourites, if not the favourite. And I think from a kind of critical perspective, he is a complete genius at work. He will do anything to create complete believability in what he's doing.
He's so into the part.
Let's see.
They must have had that feeling that they were doing something special. They must have known. Like that first scene where they're all sitting around and Jack's there for the first time, and he's just taking everything in. And like I say, they start off and they're quite quiet, and it ends up and they're all screaming at one another. And just Jack's reaction to it all. It's like in a way they may have done that, but they all been living there as the patients together, and then he comes in and he takes in what's going on and is responding to it with this naturalism, again, this sort of realism. And I think it's one of those once-in-a-lifetime films, really, that, it has a lot to say about a lot of things, It is about institutionalization, it is about love, it is about tribalism, it is about friendship, it is about so many different issues that are covered, like you said, in this.
Oh, it's kind of a complete investigation into kind of society, isn't it, and humanity, and it's a fascinating character piece for all the characters.
Sure.
It really digs deep into everyone, and as you say, because it's a film of subtleties. There's so much going on, and that's what gets across all this kind of movement of the characters. I think one of my favourite scenes is when they're playing cards.
Yeah.
And the whole messing around. because it's a scene that really allows each character to stand distinct from each other, but sharing the screen at the same time.
Yeah,
and it shows a real kind of camaraderie and friendship, which must have been there between the actors.
Oh God, yeah.
As they're doing it as well, and it just comes across as such a lovely scene, really.
Yeah, they're all so real in it. It's great. I mean, later on when you're building up to the big finish, when they have that farewell party, and they're even getting some of the catatonic patients at the back pissed. Remember that guy? He's got a drip in his mouth full of whiskey. But in that scene, there's the porter, Turkle, Mr. Turkle, played by the great Scatman Carruthers. He was also in The Shining, if you remember. Jack kills him with an axe in The Shining. Yeah. But he's in this as Turkle, and you know, that whole thing about persuading him to let the girls in. And the funniest moment for me, and there is many, many laugh out loud moments in this film for me, but the very funniest one is where they're all hiding in the office because, you know, the night commandant comes in, doesn't she? You know, see what the noises about this sort of horn-rimmed glasses, really waspish. She's marching down the wing and they're all hiding in the office in the dark. And the shot is black because they're just hiding in the dark, but you hear them all sort of sniggering and laughing like kids in a way. And somebody whispers, "Where's Turkle?" And then somebody answers, "He's probably jerking off somewhere." And Turkle says, "There ain't nobody jerking off nowhere, motherfucker." And that cracked me up because it's like, you know, despite the fact that they're hiding and they're trying to stay silent, they're still having a bit of a laugh and taking the piss. They're like suggesting Turkle's off having a ham shank. and the guy himself got so upset with it, he started telling him off, "I ain't jerking off." Oh, that, for me, that is comedy. That really cracked me up. That
it's great because it's like kind of it's that dark kind of comedy, isn't it? Which is so much fun, and like it kind realistic. Of reminded me.
It seems like realistic. Like we would take the piss out of each other, and that's the way friends have a laugh in a way. It's not like a.
It reminded me of like a bunch of lads at school, kind of.
It was like school
out.
children.
It was that. Yeah, and it was.
And they're the best laughs
so
you have
lovely.
in your life when you're in school. You know, again, another institution you're forced to go to, you're forced to be part of, but that's where you form very close bonds for the first time in your life, and that's the kind of same camaraderie that you develop.
That's it.
If you're lucky enough to have some good friends and you all have a good laugh like that. It's when you're not supposed to, you know, it's like when you go away on a school trip and, you know, you're supposed to be all asleep in the dormitory or something, lights out, but you're all just been messing about and, you know, jumping across the beds, and then the teacher comes in and everyone's sniggering and laughing. That they captured that so well in that nurse's station scene. And Scatman Carruthers is brilliant. You know, when he breaks down, when he realises he's lost his job. "Get out of here, no talking, motherfucker." It's so good. I love him.
And I love I love the scene. I find hilarious when they go on the fishing trip.
Oh, yeah.
He sneaks off to sleep with the girl.
Apparently, the guy who
Randle.
you know, the guy who comes down on the docks to say, "Who, you know, get off that boat. You can't take that boat." Apparently, on set that morning, he'd never met Jack before. Jack started winding him up on set, saying, you know, "We're going to take that boat," and it really pissed him off. So he really wound the guy up. So by the time they actually shot the scene, that anger with him was already there, and this is the genius of Jack Nicholson. See, this is the genius of the method. But I love in that scene, there's another lovely little bit in that scene you will have noticed where he calls them all doctors, Dr. Scanlon, the famous Dr. Scanlon, and he gives them all that title of doctor except for Harding, who he calls Mr. Harding, and he's looking forward to being called doctor, and you see it in his face. He looks so disappointed when he says Mr. Harding, as if he's a patient with them, and he's like, oh, I love that little rivalry between him and Harding, because, you know, Harding is...
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it?
They all hate him at the start, but even by the end, even you can't help but feel sorry for him a little bit and see him for what he is. He's a bit pathetic and he's petty, but, you know, you got to find some place in your heart for him.
Well, I love them all sneaking down on the boat when he goes to sleep with the girl, and they're all like, DeVito's character first.
Yeah.
let's have a little peek. You know, it's
trying to be a
it's a charming moment, really.
It's so funny.
Kind of just like you would in school, kind of thing, like kids do. It's like
exactly again.
And you think now they're all friends, you know.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. He treats them like he'd treat anybody else. He doesn't treat anybody like they're patients or like they're nutters or any different at all. He just says, "Come on here, get your hook, tie your line to it, get your worm on it," and that's it. He treats everybody. It's like that's the basketball game as well. He just treats them like a team, and when they actually start to beat the guards don't know what to do. They're really tough because the actual inmates are beating them in a game. This was unthinkable before McMurphy turned up. Now I gotta mention at this point, because we haven't already, but we've got to say a quick word about Chief Bromden, played by Will Sampson. The Chief is, for me, it's the Chief's story, if you think about it, because the first shot you see in the movie is a mountain, right? And you hear that wonderful, almost owl-like hooting flute in the music, and it gives you this impression. You hear an eagle, I think. You hear an eagle like cry out, and there's this really eerie opening to the film in a way, and the mountain and stuff, and that American eagle, or the sound of that bird, that spirit, it almost makes me think of the Chief. And then by the time McMurphy turns up and he goes in the ward, one of the first things he says to the Chief is, "My God, son, you're as big as a mountain." And that whole conversation they have later when he says, I don't feel like I'm as big as a mountain. I'm scared inside. I'm a big guy, but inside I'm scared. Really, that's the one, because he's the one at the end. That ending is so powerful. But it's in a sense, McMurphy is able to set the Chief free, and in a sense, that's his soul flying free when Chief bursts through that window and runs off into the credits. It's like McMurphy is also free with him. It's like this soulful moment. But geez, man, I get emotional just thinking about it. It's such a heavy piece. Jump up and put it in the basket, powerful. Chief. It is, yeah.
It's a powerful journey throughout, and it's amazing that the character who is deaf and mute, as he pretends throughout the film.
When he says juicy fruit, and Jack's like, "Oh, Chief, you," and you can't believe it yourself. Yeah, when you first watch it, you're like, "Oh my God, what a moment! What a reveal!" Yeah. So simple,
huge,
so simple in the film, but to use that, but what a reveal! It is huge.
But he'd commanded this whole presence throughout the film without you really realising it.
No?
And then, it's the, oh God, it's about him.
Yeah.
And then, the whole kind of third act of the film, and what the film really builds up to, is that kind of, Randle's here, and it's his sacrifice that saves them, and no more than the Chief,
Yeah.
But the amazing sympathy and love from the Chief to, obviously suffocate him in the end and put him out of his misery.
Sure. He wouldn't want to be like that, see.
Beautiful
he
love.
Wouldn't want to be lying there catatonic. And Chief knew that. But that, in the basketball game, to go back to that, and when Chief actually starts running up and down, and after a couple of shots of him doing that, he's got a spring in his step and he's smiling and he's enjoying himself, and they're all going crazy, and you're having such a good time watching him do it. And it's like, oh, amazing. And then suddenly it'll be a shot of her watching him in the window.
That's it.
Oh man,
stone cold eyes.
Yeah, what eyes she had. They are Oscar-winning eyes. There's such a scary gaze that is. They've just made that new thing, which is like a sort of prequel series about her character, but I am no way going anywhere near it.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Oh yeah, I know. I seen something about it the other week, and I couldn't believe they'd done it. I can't remember the title. I don't wish to remember the title, because for me, Nurse Ratched is Louise Fletcher, and that's where she belongs in this film, and nowhere else. And to try and turn her into some sort of horror character, in a way, cheapens the whole idea of her, because the thing about Nurse Ratched is she is human. She's a human being. that bit at the end when you see her with the neck brace on, and she's just like, she asks one of them if he's got his teeth done or something, and he opens his mouth for her and shows her. Very good. And she's the mother again. She's human. Everything's back to how she wants it. And yeah, man.
But in a way, I think that moment is the moment she loses some of that power. After she's been strangled and she comes back with the neck brace on. At that moment, she's lost some of that power over them because they realise.
Oh, they'll never forget what's happened. Yeah.
Yeah, she's not invincible, and that sacrifice from Jack to tell them.
Yeah.
She's not some invincible, power-hungry warlord. She's just like you and me.
Yeah, absolutely.
She is fallible, and I think that's an important turning point.
Absolutely.
But obviously, the ramifications of those actions are not pretty for Randle.
Absolutely not. They're not pretty anyway. I mean, when he strangles her, as evil as she's been, you don't want him to kill her. You don't want her to die, and you don't want him to kill her because he'll, anyway, it ends how it ends. We all know that. And like you beautifully put it, it's about Randle's sacrifice. For me, it will. I can't imagine another film getting made that's going to mean this much to me. The 70s were my favourite decade of cinema. And this is the strongest of all those films that I love the most. For me, this was the one that, like I said, the only one I've ever rewound it all the way to the start and watched it again. It's just so powerful.
I think the thing with that is, films this good are extremely rare anyway.
Yeah.
And to kind of replace it in your favourite, it's a very difficult task because that's a mix of timing and memories and nostalgia and everything wrapped up into that. So of course it's very difficult to kind of replicate that feeling for anyone. And I'm sure people, younger folks out there whose kind of favourite films become different things because their
sure.
nostalgia and history in a few years will be wrapped up in something else.
Yeah.
But it certainly is. It holds a very unique place in history. Really, only the second film at the Oscars to win the Big Five.
Sure.
All awards.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't unless it's an incredibly special film.
That's it. To be that critically acclaimed by universally, really. Critically acclaimed, it shows the powerful position it has in history and what a good movie it is, and
I certainly advise any youngsters or anyone of any age, if you haven't seen this film, you've got to see it. It's one of those see it before you die, because it's more than a film for me. This is actually one of those rare things that it's beyond, because it is such a emotive and emotional experience to watch it.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, isn't it? It's so culturally important, and can teach so much to people through the length of a film.
Yeah.
It becomes more than just a movie. It becomes something. Yeah, as you say, you have to watch this before you die. It's one of those rare pieces of cinema history.
Well, it's also rare for me in terms of the score I gave it on IMDb, which was a big 10. This one gets a 10. I haven't got many films on my watch list that are a 10, but this is definitely going to be one of them. If I could have given it an 11, if I could have given it a Spinal Tap 11, I would have given it 11, but... What about you? What would you give this one?
So, I have to agree it's a 10.
Yeah.
I think there's no other way of...
We got fireworks
looking
again,
at it, really.
folks. We got fireworks.
But yeah, I think there's no other way of looking at it. Just, it's such a fantastic film. At no point do you get bored. No. It's so important. It's so... incredibly well written, incredibly well performed by an incredible cast. It's so untypical, really, of a film.
Yeah.
It's just so important, and it's so it's well made.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so great that it goes to show, this is an American film, and it goes to show how great Hollywood can be when it chooses to tell the right stories. And this is why I love the 70s.
In the right way as well.
This is why I love the 70s so much, because so much of this stuff was real. And it puts it out there in front of you, and then you decide how good it is, and how much you get from it, and how much it tells you about yourself. And this is the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think the 70s was the most refreshing period because of that move towards a more independent kind of director-led cinema, and we were at a time that culturally was more interested in the darker shades of life, and we had more anti-heroes and the more interesting shades of grey, really.
More interesting character actors all round, I think. This is absolutely brilliant because it's packed full of character actors. All the patients.
And
they're just incredible.
It set up such a change at the time, didn't it? This, the whole kind of catalogue of the 70s, and
sure.
This is one of those top pieces of that period.
I'm sure that it's got its critics in the sense that some people would find that the message is inaccurate or something, or is not a typical example of mental institution of that time, and in other words, people who are a little bit more, who don't like that kind of criticism of America or of the human race, so to speak, and what we're capable of in terms of controlling, manipulating others.
But I think if you can't accept the critique, then that you personally have an issue, because this is exactly a kind of investigation into how bad we can act as humans,
sure.
And particularly on an institutional level.
Oh yeah.
And how we've got to bring it back to the basics, and remember it's life, and life can be full of joy.
Well, just that,
it's
the
complete contrast.
Just that treatment alone, of putting electric shocks through someone's head, as if that's going to do anyone any good. In a way, that's just like, it's like them putting leeches on you or something. It's kind of like, I can't believe you actually thought this was good therapy for people.
It's fucking barbaric.
Yeah.
And lobotomy, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, that's just like, to believe that as humans we could do such things,
sure,
which we did back then,
and
before that much worse. It's like, Jesus Christ, what were people thinking? To treat other humans in such disdain, as in, to think that they're lesser than you, is like,
to the point as well where some of them believe it. And they're the ones that feel like they can't
brainwashed.
leave. Yeah, they're completely institutionalized, and they believe that whole rhetoric. But,
and there's a couple of them are epileptics, and
sure,
they're treated with the same disdain.
Sure.
Thank God wasn't alive then. I'm epileptic.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm not alive at that time. And you think how distasteful and uneducated and unenlightened the world was back then, and it's just like,
not so long ago.
It's
just not so long.
And it's not that long ago.
60 years since the book was written, or just under. So say 45 years since the film was made.
And so I mean, it's a fantastic, and obviously of course the one of them's homosexual, and so it's it's things that it shows in such a short time how the world's changed, but it's exactly because of critiques like this, saying, no, it's barbaric and wrong, and I think that's why it's really important as well.
Oh, sure. It's definitely an important film. Like I said, everyone should see it. And if you haven't seen it for years, watch it again. And I think you'll be surprised at how emotional you still feel watching it, even if you know what's going to happen. Incredible performances.
Yeah.
You'll have a
totally
great time
watching it again.
You have a great time. It is a good, just as a movie, it is great entertainment, because of course you get all that subtext, and you get all the big questions to ask and think about and mull over. But really, just for 2 hours and 2.25 hours of entertainment, it is a hell of a ride. In a way, how about this? Footloose is the same movie, Footloose, the guy goes into a place that is, dominated by this authoritarian figure. No one dares to dance, and the one guy comes in and he teaches them all to dance, and the place goes crazy. And he has a bit of a war with the preacher in that case, who's the kind of Nurse Ratched character, and everybody learns a lesson by the end of it. It's obviously the details are different. Maybe the ending for Footloose is not as tragic, but it's essentially the same story.
But obviously that's where a lot of stories could be boiled down to similar aspects. Like that, but
the seven stories.
7 stories, but the kind of the subtext of this is so deep and so rich, and I think that's the rewarding part of it. And it's lovely to watch. You think 1975, so that's 45 years. Yeah. So quite a while. I watched a very lovely Blu-ray print of it. It's obviously been cleaned up, but looked stunning and didn't feel at all dated, because it's that kind of period piece really at this point.
Yeah,
it just felt lovely to watch, and was at the time a kind of although what is happening is obviously barbaric, the story behind it is progressive,
sure.
What they're trying to get across in its message. So it's a lovely piece to watch,
timeless,
and a completely timeless movie, and one that, as you say, anyone who hasn't seen it or hasn't seen it in a while, go and watch it. Just enjoy it.
Well, there we have it, right from the horse's mouth. So go out, watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, either for the first time or again, and you'll feel much as we do now on this kind of cloud nine, having experienced the film again recently. Hopefully you'll be able to join myself and Dave again next time for the final episode in this series, in which we'll be discussing another incredibly powerful and important film, 12 Angry Men.
That's right. We're going from Greg's very top film to my very top film, and so that should be fun to tuck into.
So join us next time for that. As for this one, Dave, it's been a pleasure as always to talk to you about this.
Yeah, thanks for having us again.
Brilliant. Well, that wraps up another episode of our favourite films. Next week we'll conclude this first series when Dave and I will be discussing 12 Angry Men. We hope you can join us for that, but in the meantime come and say hello on Twitter at moremovies4, and take a look at the website moremovies.co.uk for the latest from us. And until next time, stay safe out there and be lucky.